Once again, we're in the Axminster Skills Centre and here in delightful Devon, and with Ben behind the camera. And today we're looking at some more routing, of course. We're looking at doing some inlay work using guide bushes and cutters, and which guide bushes to use with which cutters and what sizes. I think, you know, what we'll look at today is this kind of random duck-like shape. Right, and create that to fit in that and make it sure it's a beautiful fit, no gaps around the outside. And I think we'll also have a look at this really quite common bow tie type shape. Okay, so Ben, if you can come close in and we'll have a look down on the workbench here. Let's drop those to one side. So we'll be using the little 1/4" DeWalt router today. And obviously we'll be fitting guide bushes. I think the key is with this, sometimes I see inlay work done and there's a little bit of a gap on one side, bit of a gap on the other, the opposite side. And I think generally that's because your guide bush isn't centered to the cutter. That's really important. Yes, I know, those little bits and pieces, you can use filler and the varnish or finish or oil will cover that little gap. But I think it's quite important to center everything up. And generally you only have to do this once. Quite often you'll see something like this come with your router. A little cone shape with a 1/4" one end and a 1/2" the other. This is to help you center your guide bush to your machine, to your cutter. The way this works is you'll drop in a fairly sizable guide bush. Okay, something like that, say. You drop in, you've probably got a plunge. That's why, you know, on this template work, a plunging router is always best. You can get away with a fixed base, but it becomes much more difficult. The idea is that that goes into your 1/4" shank. Now you can probably see what's going to happen here. The cone will help center everything. You screw your guide bush to the base of your machine as you would do normally, and then just release these base screws, and that gives you the ability just to release the plunge slightly, pulling this base into the cone shape, centering it, almost centering by itself. And when you're still there, still all in and centered, just tighten up these screws and you're ready to go. You're centered, and you rarely need to check that. Maybe you've dropped your router, or the base has taken a bash, or you've taken the base off for whatever reason. But that's key, centering. Now, which cutters do we use with which guide bush? This is fairly easy. You want to go as small as you can. I know you can, out there on the market, there are some you know, market bought inlay kits, but if you don't have those and you want to do this sort of stuff, it's an easy thing to remember. 6, 12, 24, 5, 10, 20. If you work on doubles, so 5mm cutter, 10mm, and then 20mm, 6mm cutter, 12mm guide bush, 24mm. You will always end up in the right place. Because what we're looking to do is the difference in outer diameter between these two pieces is equal to the width of cut on your router cutter. In this instance, the difference between these two, 12 and 24, is obviously 12, but that is doubled because it's each side. 6, 6. Same on this one. 10 and 20, don't know whether you can see those. 10mm, 20mm, stainless steel guide bushes. 5mm cutter, 5mm, 5mm is the 10mm difference. As long as you work on that, you will always get in the right spot. And make sure that you're trying to work with as small a diameter guide bushes and cutter as possible. Then if you do have any tighter corners on the shape that you're looking to produce, is that okay? Can you see that,
yeah,
man?
See that?
It will get into those tighter spots. All right? And that's what we're looking to do, for our guide bush to follow our shape. Same with the bow tie. Boom, boom. All right. let's get started. Let's do this shape first. Now it doesn't matter whether you produce the pocket or the plug first. We're going to create the pocket first in this instance. All right. So I've just got a random little piece of, this is 9mm MDF, and we're going to go all the way through this. I'm going to screw it into a sacrificial board. I think this is quite important as well. Just a sacrificial board which clamps in my vise just so I can route into. And as you can see, it's been well used. A number of different shapes you'll see cut into this. It's just a really good to save your bench top. You don't want to route into your bench top, particularly if you've taken the time to do this path and track system like we have here. So I'm just going to drop this in here just to hold it in position. Some people, when they're doing this silver work, they're happy with double-sided tape holding everything in, everything down, and even the template being held in. That's entirely up to you. I've not got a lot of faith in it, to be honest. I'm always worried it'll move, and it has moved on me in the past. I think maybe it's because I'm a little bit heavy-handed and I'm really pushing that guide bush against my template, and if it's only held down with double-sided, I'm worried it's going to move. So let's just screw that into position. And this is the piece we're going to be actually machining right now. So a couple of screws, and then we'll load in the guide bushes and cutter we need. So that just drops in. Whenever you're fixing anything down like this, make sure your screws are just sunk beneath the surface of the material. Indeed, you could make your material bigger, make your template bigger, so you can clamp it in. Of course, I've got all this clamp system and I'm screwing, but you know, you could clamp it into position by making longer templates and working on slightly larger material and then taking that material down to size afterwards. Nothing wrong with that. I'm loading in. What do we do? I'll tell you what, let's work with that. Get that out of the way. Slightly bigger set this time, and we'll go 6mm cutter, 12mm, 24. I'm going to go with the 24 first. I'll drop the 6mm cutter in. Yeah. I'll drop the guide bush in. I know this is all centered. Important, I think, if you're going to be using a driver, to drop in these delicate screws, wind the torque setting back, just so you don't chew or snap the screws off. There we are. Here's that torque setting doing what we want. So at that point now, that's what we have. 6mm cutter, 24mm guide bush. I need to get a template in position. And templates can be made from just about anything. MDF ply's good. MDF will wear over time. Plastic's good. You get some sort of acrylic on there somehow. Let's just drop that template on. Now, which way round is the template going to be? We've got a little bit more detail here. I've got a nice round sweep at this side, which is going to be relatively easy to follow. Personally, I like to turn it round so the difficult bit is closer to me, where I've got a little bit more control and I'm not outstretched. This isn't massive, so I know you're not stretching too much, but this bit is going to be the more tricky bit to follow. It's not that tricky, but it's just a personal preference thing. Okay, beneath the surface, and lift. There we go. Everything's flat and flush. We're going to be going clockwise round our template. In previous videos, we've talked about cutter drift. And if we're pulling, the cutter wants to go this way. And I want to utilize that drift, because that drift will pull my guide bush to the outside if I'm going clockwise. Other way round, if I went that way, the cutter drift will push me away, or potentially push me away from the template, making it a little bit more difficult to control. So we always go following the template clockwise. All right, you can see what the guide bush is going to do. Here we are, round, a little bit of a corner there, so maybe I'll take a bit of attention to that. Just following round. Okay. I like to have a dry run first, just to get a feel of it. Where are the lumps and bumps, the tricky spots on the template? You might be really used to doing this. It's a shape that you've created that you do a lot, so you're familiar with it. All right. Setting cutter depth. Well, we're just going to, with the guide bush in place and everything pretty much there, plunge down till my cutter just touches my workpiece. All right. Now I know the material that we've got is 9mm MDF, so I'm going to set my cutter depth to 10. All right. And I can go all the way through this in one hit. This is a 6mm cutter in 9mm MDF. So that's going to be relatively easy to do. I'm going to change slightly what I do with the next shape, where I go through the material in 2 hits, because I'm dealing with a much thinner cutter. And I don't want to risk snapping this cutter by removing too much material in one go. So we'll go down in 2 passes. So we'll go about halfway through the material and then all the way through. But we'll do that next time. And that's where this turret stop comes in on all routers. All routers have this, is to give you controlled depth into the material. Right, so I am at 10mm depth. Speed's right, small cutter, fast speed. All I need is some extraction, my eyes and ears on, and we're ready to go. Okay, so let's plug the extraction in. Get my eyes and ears. Ben's getting his ears as well, good work. Right, make sure we're off, Turn it on. Okay, so starting guide bush against the template, flick the machine on, plunge down, and you feel it pop through the material. Gently. Really tricky bit. To come to a stop, and there we are, we can drop that. If you can see what we've got there, that's the bit that we don't need. We've got this little lip here, this little nugget. Now that's where the last little bit of cut didn't quite cut because this became so weak in this area, it just snapped. If you're worried about that, you could put a bit of double-sided tape underneath this particular area, and that would help control that, but I never feel it's a problem. But what we've got is a really good, clean shape following our template. So, let's do the next bit. I'll move the template. Just literally move that over to there for this exercise. I know generally you'll be working on different materials if you want a colour difference. That's in. Alright, nice and flat. I haven't got to reset the depth. Same template, same material, same cutter, same router, that's fine. All I've got to do is switch the guide bush now. Okay, I will turn the machine off because I'm going to be diving in. Oops, change the bit. Now, it's important that you don't mix all these up like I have. Alright, so 10, 5, 10, 20. Oh, there we go, nearly. There we are. So the 12mm is the one we need next. Okay. just switching that guide bush out. It's usually easier with the extraction port off, Craig. There we are. Oh, the router upside down. There we are. Right, so I'm done with that one. Put it to one side so I don't pick up the wrong one. And that does happen a bit. You know, you forget to change your guide bush or you put the wrong one in. There we go, tool. Beautiful. Alright, so we are ready to go again. Okay, depth stays the same. You know, we've all preset that. Extraction on. Okay, eyes and ears. And let's go again. Going to start in the same place on this large, easy sweep. Remember, we're going clockwise. Really good cleanup. MDF dust. Nobody likes that. Right, so we've got this plug which is going to fit into the pocket that we've just done. There's one little thing we just need to do to the plug that we've just created. Now you might, the eagle-eyed of you might have seen it. It's that little bit there. Remember we had it on the bit that we didn't need, that waste piece. And that's where, just on that last bit of cut, instead of cutting, it just breaks off. And as I said, you could put a bit of double-sided underneath that area if it suits. I personally just literally just chisel that off. Or sand it off, whichever suits. There we go. Just a little bit of abrasive just to... That should be the only area you really need to clean up. You know, this is straight off a 1/4 inch cutter. You know, it's a nice clean edge all round. Now, the moment of truth, Ben, are you ready?
Ready.
Right. Now, it's important that you try and put it in the right way. If you've got an equal, or you think you've created a perfectly symmetrical equal shape, and you've cut it by hand, chances are it will not be perfectly symmetrical. It'll look it to your eye, but it will just be subtly out one way or another. If it's a machine cut, CNC cut, bit of plastic like a template that you've bought, then you can guarantee, well, it should be symmetrical. So this is the ooh, ah moment. Look at that. So that drops in there really well. Okay. Hardly any gappage around the outside. Following the shape all round. And that's the first one. Alright, that's what we call a duck shape. Kind of looks like a duck, I think. So that's using that template to create stuck that patch. Let's move on to the next one. Pop that on one side. So we're going to do this bow tie shape. maybe a bit more of a useful, exciting type shape. I know a lot of people use this sort of thing to span cracks and shakes in material, to shore it up really, just to stop it splitting even more. But it is a nice decorative shape. And bear in mind, you can do kind of any shape with this, providing it's not too small, and providing all the shape is generally sweeping curves. I know we've got some corners here on this one. We'll have to deal with those, and I'll show you what we need to do with those. It's very subtle what we need to do, but that's what we're going to do next. But first, I'm just going to change cutter and guide bush. Let's just isolate the machine. There we go. Whip the cutter out first. Right, so just to recap, what we've used for that particular exercise is the 6, 12, 24. And all that is okay, that's your 6mm, isn't it? So 6, 12, 24, we'll pop those way out of the way, because I'll probably pick them up again and try and reuse them and mix them up. We're going to use a much smaller cutter now. Now this is a 5mm. When you get down to cutters about this size, unless it's a kind of spiral cutter, quite often they're what they call single flute, which you only have one cutting edge. Most cutters are what they call twin flute, 2 cutters, 1, 2. This particular one is single flute. Really, because on this body here, there's hardly any more room to get another cutter in to make it a twin flute. Generally, these cutters are very fast cutting, and sometimes they can be a little bit rougher on the finish because you've only got 1 cut instead of 1, 2 cuts. It's not too bad, this one. It leaves an acceptable finish for me. So that's what we're going to use. 5mm single flute TCT tungsten carbide tipped cutter. So, that goes in, and just like before, we'll start with the bigger guide bush, 20mm this time. That's located in place nicely. Piece of material, another piece of MDF, slightly different shape. Fix that down for you. Make sure the screws are flush. Torque setting. There we go. And then our template, which to be honest we cut out on a scroll saw. It's obviously factory built, made templates you can buy. But this one is easily cut out on a scroll saw. Just a very simple image that we found somewhere. Alright, let's drop that on there. Everything's nice and flat. Alright, so there we have it. Exactly the same thing. Let's just have a feel for the template so we know where the lumps and the bumps and the corners are. A little dry run if you like. Okay. And we'll set the depth again. So we plunge down till the cutter touches the template. Now this is where I'm going to be using, let me spin the router around. This is where I'm going to be using the turret. Alright. So I'm going to set to a lower turret. Alright, so I'm plunging down. I'll zero off. I'll lift to 10mm, same material thickness. So I'll lift to 10mm, is that right? There we go. And because I don't want to, it's a much thinner cutter, maybe a little bit more vulnerable, I'll spin that turret down so I don't come down that full depth. I'm only coming about halfway, so that is about half this material thickness, about 5 mil. So we're coming down in 2 controlled steady hits. And when I'm doing any heavy cuts or you're working with a thin, vulnerable cutter, it's worth working your way into the material. Not trying to remove too much in one go. Right. And it's exactly the same thing. Remember, we're going clockwise to help keep us against the template. Make sure my workspace is clear. Right. I think I'll start there. This is a waste piece in the middle because we're cutting the pocket this time. Nice clean cut, a little bit of fluffing up here, but that's because it's a single clean cutter. It's also worth keeping an eye on waste with some deals in the corner here, because your guide bush has got to run against the template. So it's probably worthwhile just checking and clearing that, because that can hold you off the template and maybe cause you a few problems. So I'm just going to flick the extractor on to away. There we go. And this time I'm going to rotate the turret round to the one that we set the depth on, and that's going to allow me to go down further and pop through my material. That's the bit that we don't want. You can see it getting a bit skinny here, it's just the waste. Get rid of that. Now this is where it's worth probably keeping the template in the same orientation. We'll just put a little mark on it so you know which way's up. Because you probably see that this isn't quite an equal looking shape. It is something that's been cut by hand, so that's completely understandable. Okay. That's the piece that we need. So a nice clean cut pocket. Now we'll drop that on. I've subtly coloured this one, so you'll see a little contrast between the two when they're put together. There we go. Template goes back on in the same orientation, just to make it easier really. I'm sure if when you come to fit the plug in the socket and it doesn't go, you're not going to get the big hammer out and belt it. You can clearly see that it's one way or another way. Now we just isolate the machine. That does become habit, that really. And I never like diving into an area where there's a cutter on a machine, saw, router, whatever it is, and I know that machine's is live and got power to it. So we're just changing now from our 20mm down to our 10mm to create the plug to fit in our bow tie pocket. know that the guide bush is centered. Cutter depth stays the same, but we're going to go down in 2 hits again. So we'll come back, that's our original, come back to that, controlling our depth about halfway through the material. Extractions back on. Alright, it's exactly the same thing. We're just following that. We'll do it in 2 hits again, remember. Skinny little vulnerable, possibly 5mm cutter, so we don't want to overdo it. Power on. Important this time, so we don't again come away from the template at all, because we need to hit this in the middle. The perimeter, irrelevant. The pocket that you love, so the patch to the wall. These 3 cutters are really fast cutters. Quick clear up. Waste going to get in between my template and my guide bush. Rotate round to the original chapter turret, the lower one, allowing us to pop all the way through the material. There we go. You can see it pop through actually. Nice. Clear up. There. Let's see what we've got. Just remove this out of the way. This is our template. This now really becomes waste. Alright, that was the bit that we wanted, wasn't it? Right. Oh, it's not quite there. Now, let me explain why. There's a subtle difference in these corners. We've got really sharp corners on this, but subtle rounds here. Now that is standard with a slightly different, with 2 different guide bushes. So all we need to do is just, with a bit of abrasive, take off these corners, which I will do right now. Just want to rub over all round. You can see the little bit of a fluffy edge, in particular on MDF, that appears when you're using those single flute cutters. Normal. I'm not going to worry about it too much. There we go. And I'm just going to take off those very corners. As I said, it's good to experiment with shapes and templates as long as you get that guide bush and cutter relationship correct. Doubling as you go, 6, 12, 24, you'll always end up in the right place. It will always fit if your guide bush is centered to the cutter. Oh, there we go, see? Not quite equal. Now, if I was to push that in, look at that. It's such a good fit. All right, once you get him in, you probably won't get him out. All right. So, is that close up then? Can we see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Right. Neat these join lines are. Even where I've sanded these corners, they've come in nicely. All right. It shows me that I'm dead center again with my guide bush to the cutter. I'm using the correct cutter and guide bush in relationship to each other. that is a really nice fit. So that's a kind of bow tie shape. And again, you can experiment with shapes. Ben and I are experimenting with a few different shapes. We've not quite got the a little bit looser that one. We've not quite got the Mickey Mouse one. We've been playing. We want to do a Mickey Mouse one, haven't we, Ben? Mm-hmm. Not quite got the template quite right. As you can see, our template certainly looks like Mickey Mouse, or Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse probably, but these corners aren't quite right. And what it's giving us with the guide bushes we want to use is just a little bit too much of a round here. So we've got to experiment in this area just to get that right. The fit is amazing. Nice clean edges, no gaps around. That goes in beautifully. But we've just got to alter our template slightly to make it work. Well, that's kind of introduction to basic inlay work. Cut and patch, pocket and patch. Some people call these positives and negatives. I call them pockets and patches. And they can be done in any material, providing you just get that guide bush thing right. 6, 12, 24, 5, 10, 20. All right? 3, 6, 12 if you can get down that size. Well, I hope you find that useful today. Just another little routing tip, really. These videos, of course, will continue. We've had quite a few requests. Safe and correct use of on your bandsaw. Safe and correct use of on your table saw as well. Now, that is something that we're going to be looking to do over the next couple of weeks, month or so. So please stay tuned every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And don't forget to tune into Colwyn's Tuesdays and Thursdays, more wood turning wizardry. And really keep an eye on what the Axminster team are doing here. There's so many video releases bringing information to you guys. But please let us know what you want to see. So, I've been Craig Steele. It's been Ben behind the camera here. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Have a good week. Take care. Bye-bye.